Good afternoon. My name is Dibendu. I am the Deputy MD of EssenceMediacom, and with me today is Megan, who is the Country Manager of Integral Ad Science of Southeast Asia. And together, we will be taking you through the state of brand safety in the world and how the conversation of brand safety is slowly evolving from brand safety to brand suitability. And we will then delve a little bit deeper on how that journey is looking in Vietnam and what we as a marketing community can do to create transparent and accountable digital ecosystem that drives business impact for brands. So first, as I said, let us look into what brand suitability is about. So let us first start with a clip, just to have some fun.
And a little bit of chicken fried, cold beer on a Friday night, a pair of jeans that fit just right, and the radio.
Get 5 boneless wings for $1 with any handcrafted burger, only at Applebee's.
So this does not really look nice, right? Like you are really looking into one of the greatest tragedies of the 21st century, and then an Applebee's ad comes and starts dancing. And this happened on TV. Where no advertisers even asks about brand safety concern. And if you now look about digital ecosystem, which has got a number of different channels, number of different consumer behavior, this risks manifold. And these are the kind of risks you run when you're running a digital campaign. And the lowest cost an advertiser will pay is actually the financial cost, which is about the ad dollars being wasted on low viewability, ad fraud-led impressions. But the risks do not end there. As we move further along the spectrum, there's a reputational risk, as we saw in the Applebee's ad, right? It is about your brand appearing in completely inappropriate and sometimes downright abusive content, and that creates a brand reputation dent that is very difficult to bounce back from. And not to speak about, it can lead into legal risk if your ad is shown in some pirated content or in politically sensitive context, which can basically get into fines and penalties. So taking these risks into account, marketers need to really take brand safety with seriousness. But we did a survey recently of Vietnamese marketers, and what we found that only 32% of the marketers are unsure about whether they have brand safety in the ads that they are serving. While on the other hand, 64% of the consumers think that it is not appropriate for brands to appear in abusive or hate speeches or any other inappropriate content. So this means that consumers pay more attention to your brands if they come into any inappropriate content or any brand unsafe content, while the marketers in Vietnam are still unsure about the brand safety guardrails that they have put in. And this basically leads into brand safety concerns. And this brings more complexity into brand safety conversation because we are not even taking context, right? So if, for example, any brand who is championing DEI cause, they should be able to advertise on LGBTQ content because that is their cause they are proposing. But if you are using blanket brand safety guidelines, your brand ads will not appear there. So it is a kind of a catch-22 situation where you want to be present in some context, but you also want to have the reputation of your brand impact. And this leads us to something called brand suitability. We are taking baby steps in brand safety in Vietnam, but but the global conversation is slowly moving to brand suitability. And while brand safety basically helps you to avoid content in inappropriate places, what brand suitability does is bring more nuance to it. So it is about, it brings in content and it brings in context in the way that brand ads are being served to your consumers according to the brand's unique requirements. And in this journey, it's a global alliance of responsible marketing, or GARM, which has come together to help the community as a whole, global community as a whole, to create this framework of brand suitability. What GARM has done is try to create something called the brand safety floor. The brand safety floor is basically the categories where the brand ads should be a strictly no-go, and they are key categories that GARM has come up with after discussing with global NGOs, and these are the categories basically that should not be funded through advertisers. And what this brand safety flow does is it also gives the marketers a framework, a foundation based on which they can build up their brand suitability framework. And the brand suitability framework is about creating a risk tolerance spectrum. So if you see on the left, it is the brand safety floor, never suitable. So no brand ads should ever go into the brand safety floor. But as you move to the right, the risk of a brand slowly reduces, and it takes into account content and context into the picture to create different risk levels, and the brand is able to judge the risk levels based on their risk appetite. So I will just show you a few examples of how this brand suitability framework can be activated. So this is a documentary and educational platform that talks about sexual desire, right? And if a blanket brand safety principle was applied, this is a brand unsafe content. But actually this is an educational and informative content, and hence some brands, like say for example a pharmaceutical brand, an OTC brand, can safely be advertised here. So it's a low risk content actually, low risk media ad placement actually. On the other hand, this is basically a US overdose death article. If you just apply a brand safety guideline, this is a brand unsafe content. But it is basically a recent affair and is placed in a really premier ad placement. So this is also something of a medium risk, and if you have a brand suitability framework, you can decide whether your brand ads can go there or not. And the last one is a high risk. It is a glamorization of alcohol intake, and this is a very high risk content. Again, it depends on how the brand sees it, whether they have got the risk appetite to go there. So what it does is basically it brings context and content into your brand safety and brand safety guidelines and creates a brand suitability framework. We always hear that brand safety is very expensive. It brings down the brand's reach. It brings down brand's efficiency. By creating a brand suitability framework, you actually can create a better reach, create a better effectiveness, relevance for your brand ads to reach your consumers. And now I will hand it over to Megan for the next bit.
Great, thanks Dibendu. Hi everyone, so in case you missed it earlier, I'm from Integral Ad Science, or you might know us as IAS. So here at IAS, we actually release a half-yearly media quality report. And what that report actually shares with you is insights into the trends that we're seeing in all of the markets globally. Trends on topics such as brand safety. And as we know, particularly based on my conversations here in Vietnam over the last couple of days, it is a huge hot topic in Vietnam at the moment. However, as Dibendu has just introduced, the conversation really needs to go beyond that. It's not just about brand safety, but brand suitability. So today I'm going to share with you a couple of insights and some of the trends that we're seeing here in the local Vietnam market, specifically when it comes to brand safety. And then I'll also share with you after that some of the top tips and key next steps that you can actually take as marketers in order to optimize your campaigns and avoid wasting your precious media budget on impressions that are actually going to be considered served in unsafe environments and could actually be harmful to your brands. And you can actually follow these steps in order to optimize towards greater performance and efficiencies. First, let's take a look at some of the key trends that we're seeing here in Vietnam, specifically when it comes to brand safety. So brand safety, actually Vietnam has one of the lowest brand risks globally, which is great. So Vietnam's brand risk rate on average is actually 0.8%. Well, that's what we saw in 2022 in our latest report. It's actually 1.5% lower than the global average. This is good, however, this didn't come easily, and this is actually because of the increased pressure that we've seen in the local market here for brands to serve their ads in a safe environment. The reason that this rate is significantly lower than the global average is largely driven by the adoption that we're seeing of brands who are adopting blocking solutions, so they're actually avoiding serving their ads in these environments. More importantly, we're also seeing brands adopt misinformation solutions so that they can avoid serving their ads alongside fake news. We're also seeing now a significant shift where there are a lot of brands that are already adopting and starting to shift towards brand suitability. And we're seeing a significant increase in adoption of our contextual solution, which actually has the ability to understand the full context of the content of where your ads are being served, right down to the sentiment and the emotion on the page. Now, this is really important, particularly when it comes to sentiment. When I say the sentiment, I mean, is the content on the page positive, or is it negative, or is it neutral? And the reason this is important is because it means that you can actually customize and tailor your settings, but most importantly, you can avoid all of the negative news without overblocking the positive. And so you can actually make sure that you have the protection that you need without impacting scalability. The second insight that we actually uncovered, which was quite interesting, was that more than 70% of all impressions that have been flagged as brands in Vietnam considering unsafe, more than 70% of these were actually made up of content that was related to illegal downloads and violence. But then on the reverse, less than 5% of content that was flagged as unsafe was actually for reasons such as illegal drugs, alcohol, and offensive language content. In addition to brand safety, another topic that is a huge concern here in Vietnam that I actually wanted to highlight to you today is ad fraud. Ad fraud is on the rise globally, and to be honest, it's actually not a huge surprise. The reason for that is because naturally, fraudsters follow the budgets. If we continue to invest, and if digital continues to grow, and specifically CPMs continue to rise, naturally that's where fraudsters go. But the biggest concern is actually that Vietnam has the third highest rate of fraud of any market globally, behind Singapore and Japan. So this really does show the need to start acting now and the need to do something about that. And so another insight, which I also found really interesting, was actually that we compared the difference in fraud and the fraudulent activity that we're seeing for advertisers that were proactively optimizing away from fraud. And they were taking actions to block fraudulent sites to make sure that their ads weren't being served. And for advertisers who are actually proactively optimizing away from fraud, the average fraud rate that they're seeing on their campaigns is only 1.4%. We're seeing 10 times more fraud, up to 13% for advertisers who aren't actually doing anything about that. So it really does show that there's a need to do something now. So I know this is all interesting, but you're probably wondering, what can we do about it? So now I want to share with you a couple of key steps that you can take as marketers to actually optimize towards greater media outcomes. So there's a couple of key measures that you can implement and a couple of best practices to follow. Firstly, it all starts with education. I'm sure you're all familiar with this wonderful ecosystem that we all operate in. It's very complex, it's forever changing. It's really important to stay up to date with the latest trends, the latest technologies, but also most importantly, the latest risks, so that you can actually make sure that you have sufficient protection and make sure that you can actually have the best possible opportunity to deliver a successful campaign. The second step is that you want to set benchmarks. It's really, really important, and I can't stress this enough, that you need to make sure that you have a baseline in place in order to make sure that you know how you're performing and that you're working towards an ultimate end goal. There's a couple of ways that you can do this and a couple of things that you can actually consider when it comes to setting benchmarks. Firstly, you can leverage resources such as our media quality report, which will give you insights into the market. You can look at what the rest of the Vietnam market is doing. Secondly, you can look outside and look at your vertical. What are similar brands doing and how are they performing? You can also get these insights from the same report. And lastly, work with your agency. A lot of the major holding companies, particularly Group M, they have their own benchmarks in place as well, and they'll be able to help to guide you, as well as us, to make sure that you have the appropriate benchmarks in place so that you have a goal that you can work towards. Next, once you have an appropriate brand safety strategy in place and you've got your benchmarks in place, the next step is to monitor your performance. You can actually activate blocking tags, which will do two things for you. They will help you to monitor every impression that you're serving, and it will help you to understand what your brand safety failure rate is, so you can actually get insights into your performance and where your ads are being served. But most importantly, these blocking tags will actually also help you to avoid serving ads in environments that are unsafe, and ads that are going to be served in environments that you have deemed as not appropriate and could be potentially catastrophic and harmful to your brand's reputation. Once you have all of these insights from monitoring your campaigns and running these tags, then it's time to optimize. And optimization is actually the most critical step that you need to take and that you can take on your media quality journey towards brand safety. And the reason for that is because it's critical to not just understand what you're doing, and you don't want to just block all of this harmful content, but you actually want to make sure that you're optimizing towards the media partners that are going to actually allow you to deliver the greatest possible performance. And you want to optimize away from all of the harmful traffic. You don't want to waste your media budget spending it on impressions that are going to be blocked later on anyway. So IAS and Group M have actually worked with many global advertisers on this. And one which I thought was a key standout was actually a global brand that we've been working with in over 20 countries, including Vietnam. And they actually begun monitoring their campaigns, and they realized that a huge 15% of their global media budget was actually going towards low quality or poor quality impressions. So this was impressions that were unsafe. They didn't want to serve their ads there. It was impressions that were going to fraud, so it wasn't even being seen by a real person. A bot isn't going to walk into a store and purchase a new car, so why are you trying to serve ads to it, and why are you wasting your media budget there? After actually activating optimization solutions, they were actually able to optimize their media campaigns, and they were able to bring their brand safety rate down to 0.02%, all the way down from 15%. They also got their fraud rate down to next to nothing at 0.05%. So it is possible, you just need to put the right measures in place in order to be able to do that. I'll pass it back over to Dibendu.
Yeah, thanks, Megan. So as we saw that when we talk about brand safety and we move towards brand suitability, it is not just about creating viewable ads and without ad frauds. A lot of the people were talking about AI, and we have now got technologies that can actually identify emotions or context of articles, what is the intent of the author in that article. So we have got these technologies that can basically help us to be more relevant when we are placing brand ads. Not to speak about attention, which is one of the key factors that will be taken into account going in, and that is what a brand safety and suitability framework allows you to do. And how to do it, Megan will again just go through a maturity journey around that.
Great, thanks Dibendu. Now, I know that this is a lot of information, and there's a lot of different marketers in the room, and I'm sure that you're all at completely different stages of this journey as well. And that's okay. There might be people who can hand on heart say, I don't have a brand safety strategy, or I'm not sure what to do, or I'm not sure where to start. As I mentioned earlier, the most important part to operationalizing your brand safety and suitability strategy is actually the optimization stage. So we've broken out a 3-step framework for you to basically break it down so that you can get an understanding of what steps you need to take and where you should start in order to deliver greater media outcomes. So the first step, and this is what I would recommend for marketers who are new to brand safety, who don't have any existing strategies in place, the very first steps that you need to do is first, you need to start monitoring your performance. You need to get an understanding of exactly where your impressions are being served. Where's all of your ad budget going? So by activating a blocking tag, you'll actually be able to get insights into the type of content that your ads are being served against, and you'll actually gain insights into your brand safety failure rate. In addition to that, it will of course block your ad from serving alongside anything that you have deemed as harmful and inappropriate and you don't want to serve your ads against. Next, you can create, and you should also frequently review, inclusion lists, exclusion lists, as well as keyword lists. Now, one thing that I should mention is that brand safety isn't just set and forget. I wish that I could say to you today, implement your brand safety strategy tomorrow and you're done for the year. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. It really is something that you need to keep reviewing. And so generally speaking, I do recommend reviewing your safety and suitability strategy and settings campaign by campaign, because every campaign has different KPIs and different outcomes. And you might have different brands that you're working on as well. So you want to make sure that you're constantly reviewing it to keep it up to date. Next, you want to avoid relying on any binary brand safety solutions. When I say binary, you don't just want to take a blanket approach and avoid all content to do with alcohol or all content to do with adult, because every brand is different, as we know. And Dibendu went through the GARM framework earlier, which really gives you the ability to customize according to what is most important to your brand. So you want to make sure that you're using a solution that gives you the flexibility to do that. Once you have the basics in place and you're ready to take it to the next level, that's when we can get to the next level and start activating some new solutions. And so one of the next steps I would recommend taking is using pre-bid. When you are running your post-bid blocking, it will give you insights into how you're performing and it will stop your ads from serving, but ultimately you'll still be paying for all of those impressions. So you want to avoid wasting any media budget by spending it in areas that you don't want your ads to be seen, and you want to avoid wasting media budget on serving ads to bots. And so with pre-bid, it will basically enable you to only target serving your ads in the right environment and in an environment that meets your standards and your benchmarks that you've put in place. Next, brand suitability. And this is exactly what we were talking about earlier, the shift from brand safety to brand suitability. You really want to take it to the next level. And so by doing so, what you can actually do is you can activate a contextual solution. As I mentioned earlier, you want something that's going to take into account the sentiment of the page so that you can avoid all of the harmful content that is negative. So to give you an example, we might have an auto brand. Let's say Toyota's running a campaign to launch their latest car, and they might want to target environments or pages that are talking about content such as the best road trip destinations that you can take from Saigon. However, I guarantee you that on that same campaign, they don't want to serve their ads alongside content that talks about a fatal car accident. And so this is where the sentiment of the page is so important. If you were to just generically to target users or content that is related to cars or automobile, there is a risk that you're going to serve your ads next to content that talks about a car crash. And that can have serious repercussions for the brand. So you want to make sure that the solutions that you're using can detect the sentiment and the emotion at the page level. Next, you can use these insights to set agreements with media partners so that you can have streamlined campaign delivery. Once you've done all of that, you're happy with your safety and your suitability strategy, that's when it gets to the really exciting, innovative section. And to be honest, there might not be a lot of brands in the room that are quite there yet, and that's okay. It's a 3-step process and it does take time, but there's always a time to start now, and you can start from the beginning and then continue to grow. So once you are ready and you're confident in your safety and suitability strategy, that's when you can do things such as leveraging contextual performance data to inform your scenario planning strategy. In addition to that, you might then want to look at something such as attention. Dibendu touched on it earlier. We now have the ability to actually detect user attention. Okay, yes, your ad was seen by a real person, but how long did they view it for? Did they engage with it? Did they scroll? Was the sound turned on? These are all things that we now have the ability to understand, and you can actually start to optimize towards these metrics as well. Lastly, for marketers that are running a lot of programmatic campaigns, you can also consider something such as supply path optimization. Your standard brand safety and suitability strategy will enable you to understand what percentage of your inventory or your impressions that you've served were flagged as being unsafe or unsuitable. But now you actually have the ability to go beyond just a percentage, and you can actually understand what does that mean in terms of dollar value, right down to the cent. This brings me to the end. I know it's a lot, I just wanted to share with you a quick sort of recap on some of the next steps and key outcomes that you can actually take as a marketer in order to optimize and deliver greater media outcomes. We've covered a lot today. Dibendu touched on what brand safety is, why it's important. We've looked at some of the trends here in the local Vietnam market, most specifically the shift from safety to suitability. There's no better time to start now. Thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate your time here and hope you enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.